Alright. Hello.
Welcome back to Roots and Refuge Farm.
If by chance this happens to be your first video that you've ever caught of ours, hi, welcome. I'm Jess. This is Maya. And this is not... I feel like I've been doing a lot of sit-down videos where I kind of like share a lot recently and being like, hey, this isn't really our normal content. And maybe it's starting to feel pretty normal, actually.
It may be something that we do more often.
Yeah, I would call it like a coffee chat, but we already drank our coffee. You could have some coffee while we chat. That's what we're about to do. A little backstory. We've been making YouTube content regularly for going on 7 years.
7 years, yeah.
And I think at this point we've made, I don't know the exact number, it's over 1,500 videos. I mean, it's a lot of content over the years. But our goal has always been, what we've said, is we want to live in a glass house.
Like to live authentically.
Yes, which, what you see is what you get with us. I think my favorite compliment I ever get from anybody who meets us after they knew us through YouTube is when people say, wow, they're just, in person, they're just like they are on videos.
Right.
Because that is my genuine hope. My hope is that you are experiencing real life with real people.
Well, they usually say it's a little bit backwards. Like, you're quieter and less talkative, and I'm way out there and funny. Because in person, we just engage differently.
Right. Well, that is true. But that's not like, that's kind of personality traits and communication. Like
Also, apparently, you're not as tall as people think, and I'm way taller than people think.
Well, everybody thinks that I'm whatever height they are because they're used to seeing me at eye level, because that's where I hold the camera.
That's funny.
So I'm not tall. I'm 5'5".
You're not short.
I'm 5'5". But anyways, all of that to say, yes, I tell you all that I'm introverted. I don't know that you really grasp that because you see me alone in my garden with a camera. I'm talking to you in the complete comfort of solitude. So you really get to know me as my close friends know me. Now, in a public setting, I am typically a lot more reserved than what you see on the camera, at least at first, because I'm just processing that.
Yeah.
Either way, I want to live honestly. I want to share farm life honestly. You know, I mean, the primary thing that we share here is homesteading, growing food, raising animals, gardening, and then really raising a family. When we started making content several years ago, I had no clue that one of the big values that we would bring to this space would be showing family life and relationship the way that we do, marriage and stuff like that, because I had in my life failed at those things so grandly that I really disqualified myself. So when we started sharing content, we would get comments about, man, it's really awesome to see people who've been married for as long as you guys have and like each other. Because the media and television so portray marriage in a way that's, honestly, I feel like really unfair to how marriage can be. It can be awesome. Now that we are where we are right now, turning the camera on today, in the beginning, we're now officially in fall, the summer has come to an end. I want to continue on living in a glass house now with the awareness that we are sharing all aspects of our life and they're all very valuable to you, especially when we share them honestly. Because I don't know that people get enough of an honest look at just life in general.
Right.
And so we can feel really isolated sometimes when we think we're the only people that go through struggles or think certain things or want to give up.
Or be overwhelmed or,
have to change plans.
Which is, I think it makes it even more difficult in positions like this because, like, when we did the video in the middle of summer, talking about not building the house, like, that made it almost more difficult to make that choice because we had already told lots and lots of people that we were building the house. Yeah. Like, it was less about, we ended up paying for a survey, and like, we even spent money in the direction of building the house, which didn't really bother me as much as having to go back on YouTube and tell everyone,
we're not doing
something we said we were going to do. But it didn't change the fact that that was the right thing to do.
So we did a video middle of the summer kind of talking about how we're changing some plans. And essentially what's happened is there's just been some progression on that. And so we want to tell you guys a little bit today about our crushing summer. And
Is that what we're calling
that's
it?
what I've been calling it, is the crushing summer. Because there's like multifacets to that. Like, one, it did feel very crushing.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. I mean, it was just really hard. But the beautiful thing is like, how is wine made? Grapes are crushed. How is oil made? There's a crushing. And so I do feel like this summer absolutely produced something very valuable in us, but it required a crushing to kind of get to the value and the realization. So we're going to tell you a little bit about some of the conclusions we've come to and some of the changes that we're making in response to our crushing summer.
Yeah, I would say that like the last video was probably like right before the grape splits.
Yeah, we were like, okay, we're going to change plans.
Yeah, I feel a lot of pressure, and then it was like one more turn of the wheel.
Yeah.
And
yeah, for sure. I just made apple cider with Morgan this last week up in Vermont, and it was very much a crushing, a pressing. We're very resilient people, Jeremiah and I are. We can endure a lot. This is something that we've learned about ourselves individually, and I think together.
yeah.
And it's not necessarily a great trait always. Like, it is a really valuable trait.
In certain situations it is, but honestly a lot of times in like what we're about to talk about, it can actually be something that keeps you in a cycle that you need to get out of.
Because you just don't deal with things. You don't necessarily, like, we're really good at like putting our head down and like just doing the next thing. We're very good at surviving essentially, and it's honestly trauma response. Like, it's not necessarily great. However, being resilient as people is very good. Like, I mean, it's a very good thing, but you have to, I guess, have the awareness to go with it of like, hey, are you dealing with the stuff in your life, or are you just surviving through it? And so we've called this the crushing summer. It's talked about how hard it was, but sometimes I think it takes like a hydraulic press worth of pressure to get extremely resilient people to like look up and go, oh man, I need to make some changes. And I think that's kind of what happened.
That's exactly what happened
for us this summer. Is it took that measure of pressure, because had it stayed manageable, we would have just kept doing what we were doing, because
there was no pressure to change.
Right. That's why I've really been changing, which I want to get back on topic, but like I actually did a talk this last weekend in New England about resilience, and I've really changed the way that I have talked about that topic in response to this summer. I think that you can be so resilient, but if you do not have self-awareness, you can still be fragile.
Yeah.
So.
Because it's like, if you're feeling pressure,
yeah,
like in life, get your head up and look around, like assess things.
Yeah.
Like, that's probably why you're feeling the pressure.
Right.
Right? And then that's essentially where we're at. Like,
yeah, pressure's not bad. It makes the oil, it makes the wine.
It feels bad, especially if you keep your head down thinking, like, I'm just going to get through this. I mean, we had so many conversations leading up to this summer that was like, if we'll just get through the summer, if we'll just get through this, then it'll break and we'll be fine.
It'll be easier.
It'll be easier.
No.
That wasn't what happened.
Well, it actually did. We got through the summer.
Well,
it's easier. It just took a lot. All right, let me tell y'all what's been going on. So, very quick Cliff's Notes. Some of you know this stuff. I actually have discussed this a little bit in my podcast, and I have been mentioning how we've been auditing, how we've been looking at things, we've been reassessing our why, we've been looking to downsize throughout the vlogs of the summer. But here's the Cliff's Notes summation. In May, Jackson, my oldest son, the boy that made me a mom, graduated. Now, Malia graduated last year, and that was like kind of the precursor taste of this, but Malia has not lived with us full time. You know, that right. Since we have been together, Malia's always visited, and so we like tasted it, but her like launching into adulthood didn't actually drastically change the day-to-day in our life. Mm-hmm. So I had some people ask, why is this coming to you at Jack? Malia actually graduating, she since moved here. We actually have more time with Malia since she's come into adulthood. Like, we have closeness with Malia, so it's just a different dynamic. It
was just two things shifted differently.
Yeah. And so with Jackson graduating in May, it rocked me. I actually I had zero awareness going into it that it was going to rock me so much. And not in all the ways you would think. I would say that I am not a mother that puts the entirety of my identity in my children. I have been very mindful for a long time that that's not sustainable. I love my children deeply, and I have really ordered my world to serve them and care for them and raise them well. But being their mom is not like the number one thing that I am. And so I really did not anticipate Jackson graduating and preparing to launch, and he is now in college at the University of South Carolina, living in the dorm. It's only an hour away, so he's still pretty close, and we see him fairly regularly, but it's been a huge adjustment. Mm-hmm. I did not expect it to rock me the way that it did, but here's what happened. I realized upon how deep my grief was and my shock was, and how much it made me just be like, what in the world? How did this happen? How did this go by so fast? I was 19 when I had Jackson. Mm. So at 19, there is no way that I could conceptualize how fast a childhood goes by, because mine had felt like an eternity. Like, it was my whole life. Like, so the idea of you only have 18 years with this child under your roof, dependent on you in this way, you know, you only have this. It felt like a lifetime to me. It felt like an eternity, because it was my entire lifetime. I was looking at the span of life that I had with him was the exact same as what I had lived.
And it felt like a lot.
It felt like a lot. It was my whole life. 19 years feels really different at 40 versus when you're 19.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the first probably 10 years for me of parenting and mothering, and of course I went on to have multiple other children, and now we have a house full still. I don't know, it's like the first 10 years of it, I don't even think I even realized how fast it was going by. Mm-hmm. And then when I started to realize, it was like, okay, it still felt like I had a lot of time, and then all of a sudden, my son is a man, and I'm like, oh my God, that's how fast a childhood ends? Mm. What? And then we come to this summer, and we had a rough summer on the farm. A lot of things, I don't even know how to put this in summation. Things on a farm get big fast. And I've told you all for years, you need to know your why. You need to be aware of your systems. You need to be willing to say no. Chicken math is funny to joke about, but it's not funny when you have 150 chickens. You know, like, things can snowball so quickly because everything on a farm multiplies. Mm. That is just the nature of it. You know, you're going to have dairy animals. They're going to have babies every year. What are you going to do with them? You know, you're going to breed pigs. You're going to get all these piglets. What's your plan? And things can get out of hand really quickly.
And it's not like it just happens all the time, but maybe it'll feel like this, because it feels like sometimes when those things start to get out of hand, it's like 2 or 3 things will get out of hand at the same time.
Right.
Like, that has happened to us multiple times. And like, that's definitely what it felt like this summer. It was like one thing started to happen, and I was like, okay, that's not great, but you know, I'll put my focus on it. Give it my full attention. And then like, before that's even like starting to like resolve and be different, there's something else, and it's like, okay, now I've got to split. And then there was something else, and it was like, and that's where the pressure for me on like the homestead kind of just like, I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah. Like,
that's kind of where I came to, is because multiple things started happening, and I didn't even.
And by things, he's saying like the cows, you know, the dairy cows. Oh, we're having an issue here. We're having to address with. Oh, now we're having an issue with the sheep. We're having to address. And
so it was, the dairy cows, the sheep, and then like even just like the pressure on our pastures from the amount of beef cows that we had accumulated.
Yeah.
You know, I was just like, and
we weren't buying them; they were just having babies.
Right. We haven't purchased anymore, but like, you know, you have a bull and cows, they make more cows.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's just happening, like, you don't really, like, it doesn't hit you. Like, oh, wow, I have 20 head of cattle in here when I started with, like, 7.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, how did we have so many?
Yeah.
But just, like, time is kind of going by. Like you said, you got your kid graduating. You're not thinking about that stuff. Like, honestly, heading into the summer, like, I wasn't thinking about my farm systems. I was just maintaining.
We got to get through this
busy summer. Which, and how the busy summer started is like, it's not even that stuff was bad. It was all actually pretty good stuff. I felt like all of it had purpose and was good. But like we planned a couple of things early, so like a year ago.
Some conferences.
And everything was spaced out. It was like, oh, we got to go to this conference here. Then we're going to go on our cruise, right? We're going to do like a camping trip in between. Everything seems fine. And then
multiple things come up. Moving Malia was unexpected.
A week-long family reunion vacation party thing. You know what I'm saying? And that was all good stuff, but it was like, oh, that wasn't accounted for. So then everything just got stacked.
Yeah. And so we're kind of juggling anyway. This is one of the things that, like, you may have somebody to watch your farm for you to go out of town, but your farm, your gardens, any of your systems, they're always going to do better with your presence. It wasn't that anything got neglected by any means on our farm this summer. It was just that when an issue pops up and it needs your attention, it needs your attention. So we're fully having to give attention to systems that were becoming overwhelming while also managing all this stuff with our family, which was absolutely, important to do. Like, I would not take back that week-long trip I had moving Malia here with her for anything. That was probably one of the most pivotal things in our entire relationship.
And I think the thing that I think maybe we sometimes do and maybe y'all can relate, is that when that all started to kind of happen, like, it was the stuff like the reunion and the week-long trip and the camping trip and all that. That was the stuff we initially looked at to be like, well, what can we not do? What can we cut out? What can we cut down? And that was really the wrong approach, because when it finally came down to it, we were like, I don't want to cut down that stuff.
Yeah, in the past, in previous years, when we were hit with a crunch of farm and work, the thing that we would have cut is, well, we just won't go on this trip with the kids.
Right. We won't take them to go do the thing we talked about.
We can't leave the farm because of this. Or I'll just fly out and get Malia and we'll fly back.
Right, which we could have done. We would have trimmed down in years past on the family stuff to make it work. But then Jackson graduated and I got rocked. And I realized how fast a childhood goes by. And I realized that my number one priority for doing any of this is ultimately for the legacy for my children. And so the reason why this summer ultimately broke us is that the area where we would have previously been willing to bend a little bit, we didn't. Mm-hmm. And so we were so slammed this summer. There was no time. We weren't both gone the whole summer. I mean, it was stuff that... Yeah, but even then, like, that takes its toll, because, like, we're not actually having time to connect with each other, right? Yeah. And it's just, I mean, and I know parents are going to relate to this, like, it's like, hey, good to see you. I'm going to take this kid and go do this thing. You're going to take that kid and go to that dental appointment. Yeah. And then you're going to drop him off, pick up, the kid that broke his arm and take him to the
And then in the meantime, we're treating mastitis, and we're, like, doing this and trying to preserve harvest, and we're, like... It was
content, all of it. Like, it's just like, okay, well, what
gives? That's kind of what it came down to, I think, is we got to the point of being like, what gives?
Well, no, in the whole moving Jackson thing, like, one thing that really stuck out, like, hit Jessica, and then she shared with me that I was like, yeah, I see this, is like, we really did the math, and like, we have 9 years before Ben is going to college. He's in the same position
Our baby.
that Jackson's in right now. 9 years. And now we realize how fast 9 years is going to go by. It's like, I don't want to spend the next 9 years deprioritizing this stuff.
Yeah. I will tell you guys that one conversation happened that I didn't actually know for sure if I was going to share about this publicly, but I think that you should know the place that we had to come to regarding our farm, regarding YouTube, regarding literally everything that we're doing in our life. I've taught you guys multiple times, I've shared my process for auditing. I imagine holding a hand of cards, okay? And every single card represents some need, something, relationship, some activity, some choice I'm making to engage with that requires something of me. So, like, there's a card that's Jeremiah, that this is our marriage, our relationship with each other. There's our business, each business represents something, because we have the roastery, we have YouTube, the different things we're doing. Each of our children, Malia, Jackson, Asher, Toby, Ezra, and Ben, that's 6 cards right there. Each of those represents a relationship, and it's not just this kid needs to go to the dentist appointment, or this child is in baseball. It's also like, I want to be connecting at a heart level with each of my children in a way that matters to them. I need them to feel my presence in their life. And then goats, cows, you know, like each card, supper club, like each and everything that requires some of our capacity, we're holding it.
Well,
and
I feel like Uno, where it's like draw 4, draw 4.
Yeah. And I mean,
oh wait, reverse draw 4, reverse draw 4, reverse. So it just keeps coming back.
And I've always said, you know, there comes times that you need to assess what's in your hand. You need to say, what is it that I'm trying to hold, especially when you find yourself and you have a capacity. And even if you're very resilient and you're a very high capacity person, like there is a tank in you. And when it is empty, it is empty. Like, and you can run on fumes for a little while, but eventually you're going to break down. Like, you cannot push yourself past your capacity indefinitely. It just doesn't work. There are limits. This is why boundaries are important. What happens when you have a handful and it's all good stuff? You have to figure out, okay, I've got to bring in some real prioritization. And this is why we have to go back to the why we are doing things. And basically we did a sit-down video. We were planning on building a house this year. That got put on the chopping block. We didn't feel a lot of peace about it. We were way overstretched, and we're like, okay, obviously this is not the right time.
And honestly, getting through the summer and realizing, I'm glad that we didn't start the house.
Yes, I'm so thankful.
How much worse would the pressure have been?
Well, our kids would have.
We would have had to have cut that stuff.
They would not have had our presence. So it's just not something. I'm so thankful that door ended up getting shut. Already, I'm thankful for that. Basically, we shot a video talking about that. Middle of the summer, still kind of in the throes of the busyness. We lost Hope, our first dairy cow this summer. That was really heartbreaking. And a little goat, which was kind of, it was very sad, but it was kind of par for the course. You know, things like that happen.
Honestly, we had a lot. Like, we had been here a while and not have dealt with a lot of loss. We haven't
dealt with a lot of loss. Well, then our sheep start giving birth, and we ended up dealing with some loss there. I shared that with you guys. It was just really like, man, it's one thing after another. Well, then around that same time, we had an issue with another one of our dairy cows, Fern, and we heavily involved the vet. It ended up being very expensive, and it was kind of a freak thing. But we ended up losing Fern also. And essentially, she, in her whole process of all the things that had happened, she had a retained placenta and it was treated. She got mastitis. We were treating that. But she ended up having a blood clot to her udder. And it was really bad. We heavily involved the vet, and basically it came down to it. And basically what we were looking at was surgically removing a large part of her udder. And obviously she's a great cow, a dairy cow, but that was not something that, one, we could really afford to do because it was going to be several $1,000s. But
like a used Honda Civic's $1,000. Like it was considerable. Yeah. And trust me, I considered it.
And so we had to make that decision too. And had we not made the decision proactively, it would have happened outside of our control. She would have just died. But we decided to make that decision to put her down. That one was really, really hard. And then in the same little window there, so after all the loss, the sheep and all that stuff, 2 of my alpacas died. That was not necessarily a tragic death because they were very old. They were like 19 years old. So, it was an old age thing. I think that it was during like our really, really hot week. It was like the hottest week of the summer. So I think that maybe the heat played into it, but it was just, they were very old, there was no signs of sickness or anything like that. It seemed that they literally, within just a few days of each other, laid down and died. Now, they'd been together for the entirety of their 19 years, and I actually do think that animals can be heavily affected by like heartbreak. I've seen that. I've seen animals kind of just like give up. And so that one was not as tragic as Fern, honestly, because they had such a long life, but it was still deeply sad. And it was just the fact of like, how much more, how much more are we gonna have to deal with here? I look back on back in Arkansas, we had a really hard summer several years ago in Arkansas before we did YouTube, where there was a lot of loss. Mm-hmm. And in retrospect, I've always looked at that like it was our fault. Like, oh, if we had been stewarding better, if we had been doing better, it could have been avoided. And there maybe are some things, like we've addressed our mineral deficiencies, we've addressed some different things, we've switched over some other systems, like assessing this summer and how much loss we had. Like, okay, what can we do?
There are definitely some things that we could have tweaked. It doesn't necessarily, here's the thing, here's the trap. So like, you can assess those things and make adjustments. That doesn't mean that it should, but it does not mean that you would have ended up with a different result.
Right.
Like, you know, for Fern especially, like, trust me, I've thought a lot about, like, well, what if? But I mean, even doing the things that I feel like okay, well, what if I had tried this or done this early enough or whatever it was, doesn't mean that it would have went different.
Right.
Like, you can't really stay in that place.
Yeah, it's healthy to assess and make adjustments to your systems accordingly and to take responsibility where your stewardship is called into question. But it's also healthy at some point to recognize that you're dealing with life to this capacity, you are going to deal with death. And so we've kind of had to go between that. But this summer was a doozy as far as like losing a lot on the farm, and especially since it has been several years since we've really lost much of anything. We have really good systems and our stuff is very well cared for. But even with involving the vet in all of these situations, you know, like, it didn't change it.
No. No, yeah, I called the vet the last time and they were like, yeah, there's nothing else that we can do. Like,
yeah.
Here are your options. And I was like, I don't like those options.
Yeah.
Didn't change anything.
Yeah.
Like, just had to face it and make a hard call.
All of that, the doozy summer, realizing how fast your childhood goes by. What the conversation that I wasn't sure I was going to share publicly. I think this was like the day after we moved Jackson into the dorm. It's when we were dealing with like the middle of all that death, like coming to a head. Because the stuff happened with Fern the week we moved Jackson. And we also had 2 calves born that week, which basically that was poor planning on our part, like not staggering the births. And so we're moving our kid. We're dealing with a really busy summer. We just got back from the vacation that we had planned. We're getting the other kids into school. Jackson moves, you know, Fern dies, alpacas die, like bam, 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 bam.
Well,
oh,
then, like,
and you have 2 new calves, and you've got to get these cows into milk in a healthy way because you don't want to have issues.
Yeah, that's the thing I was looking at as a person who's in charge of like the dairy cows and not being on top of the rotation of breeding.
Yeah.
Like, had, let's just say Hope and Fern both lived and didn't get sick and didn't have those issues, I would now have 4 dairy cows in milk at the same time, which completely defeated the purpose of having 4 dairy cows.
Because it was for being staggered.
It was for being staggered. And I'm like, and I just take responsibility. I'm like, okay, well, obviously, like, the way I've done things is basically set this up to be like this.
Not been efficient and organized enough to, like, handle it.
But I mean, honestly, like, I was just like, I was at capacity, and so that was not something that I had given enough of my mental capacity to decide. And I just wrote all of this out. It took several hours to kind of like get my head around it, who's doing what, when can I breed them, kind of thing. But I've got it now set up, and I'm still working through some of the kinks of getting it fixed. But once I get it back to where I need to, like, I've got it set up because I put my full capacity on it to be able to have a cow in milk for a certain amount of time with one coming behind her and just keeping it going.
This all comes to a head, you know, late August, middle of late August. And then that next morning, Jeremiah comes out and I'm sitting on the front porch, and full transparency, I handed him a real estate listing for a lake house and was like, do you want to quit? Like, one thing that I'm not going to go into great detail that has also been happening coinciding with this is that we've been dealing with a ton of inner healing and kind of unpacking some really deep stuff that needed to be handled, that needed to be looked at, that needed to be processed. And the thing that I came to in feeling the crushing weight of all of this is that at the end of my life, I want to say that I did marriage well and I raised my children well. And any other significance that we experience, anybody we inspire, anybody we feed, anything that we do that's extraordinary on top of just having a healthy family cool. That's the gold star. It's icing on the cake. But like at the end of my life, all of that extra stuff would not have been enough substance for me to have felt like I did what I meant to do. And as we've been like going through all this healing and dealing with all this pressure and auditing all of our systems, I finally came down to it and said, can we do this? Like, because if I had 2 acres, I could feed our family. You know, we wouldn't have the diversity we have now. We wouldn't have the freedom we have now. We wouldn't have the options that we have now. But I could feel secure food-wise on a lot less than this. We did it for a long time. I mean, we did a lot on just a few acres in Arkansas. Now we have more options. It's easier to do.
Well,
it's more sustainable. We have more grass.
Right. And we really honestly considered it. Like,
I mean, we really did sit down and he's like, we're not moving. And I was like, okay, hear me out.
Well, that's that resilience talking. I was like, I'm not quitting anything. Like, yeah. I can do anything that I start, I can finish. Finish carpenter, love finishing stuff. Hate not finishing stuff. This is why I get bullheaded and resilient, because I'm like, no, of course I can make this work.
And I literally actually, this is my dream life. I am the garden girl, the homestead girl. I love this. This is literally everything I ever dreamed of. But in the middle of it, the thing that I came to is we can't keep doing this. It's going to break us, and it's going to break us on a foundational level that it's going to cost us what actually really matters. And so we sat down, and it was a brief conversation, the idea of quitting. One, I mean, it's really important for us to be debt-free, and that's something that we are putting back very high on the priority list. We had considered building the house, which would have put us in a considerable amount of debt, and that was part of the decision not to do it, was that it did not feel like a financially responsible decision in the middle of this economy. And while it would have been really nice to have this nice big new house, at what cost? If it's at the cost of our security, then I don't want it. No dream is worth breaking the foundation. It's not really a dream come true if you have to break the foundation to build it. The beautiful thing for me is the realization of like, I would be happy with you, with our kids. I could have a little garden. I could have a handful of chickens, maybe a couple of dairy goats. Like, I would be happy with a much smaller expression of this. And that's where it came back. Okay, what is our why here? Like, why are we even doing this? Reconnecting with why you are doing something is the most empowering thing. We are growing food because we firmly believe that this lends to a healthier life in every aspect. I believe our food system is broken, and I don't want to be dependent on it. I believe that, a life where I use my body in this way and then I engage with nature in this way, it makes me healthier in every aspect. It makes our family healthier. And what we basically had to do is bring all that why back up to the forefront. We want resilience, actual resilience, not something that's so big that it's actually fragile. Not something that doesn't actually nurture the foundation of our family. Not something that takes from the foundation of our family. We want...
And then and assess priorities. So... Like our kids, raising them, spending time with them. It's like doing the stuff with them for the next 9 years that we have them in our home. Yeah, prioritizing the things that matter to them and being present with them and having the time that we're not constantly just speeding by. No, some of that is bringing the kids out to the barn with us, bringing the kids to the garden with us, like engaging with them in the middle of what we're doing. It doesn't have to be either or. What we realized is that we were pouring a lot of energy into creating way more than we actually need. Like, for instance, we'd gotten our beef herd and it had grown exponentially, but we don't need that many cows every year. I mean, honestly, I still have beef in the freezer, so like, I don't even need that much beef now, like, in an active sense, like. Right. And we realized we could cut back significantly. It would cost us way less money to, hay, we're going into winter. I mean, like, hay last year was astronomical compared to the year before just because how many more cows we had, and it had multiplied again. Took a lot of time. And we were like, okay, well, we could downsize this significantly.
we kind of were forced into the place of downsizing our dairy because we lost 2 of our 4 dairy cows this summer. And we reassessed that. Like, we don't need this much milk. Let's pull this back so that we can reclaim some time while covering what we actually need. One of the things that I realized is that I was, ants got me. One of the things I realized is, I grew this massive garden. It's way more food than we need. I've stated that before. And I had come into like, okay, well, I'll do cut flowers. Well, I don't like cutting flowers. I like watching them grow. Like, I was trying to make sense of how much space I had. I made this much space to be able to have plenty to show for content because this is my job. This much space made it where I didn't have time to make as much content. And so I had to stop and be like, okay, while I love having so much to share of the things that we're producing and to sell to the local community, is it better for us to be stretched so thin trying to produce for 20, 30 families to enjoy? Or is it better for us to scale it back to really meet the needs of our family and then be able to create content for thousands of families to be able to grow for themselves? And this is not a slight to anybody who we've been providing anything for. But the thing that I really came down to is realizing I really personally, now there are plenty of you who are market gardeners, market farmers, who you have the mind around creating an efficient business where you are creating to sell, and we need that. But I had to realize that personally, it is way more important for me to inspire creators and inspire creation rather than to provide for consumption. Because we have been given this unique opportunity in just living our dream life, minding the foundation of our relationship, minding the foundation of our priorities with legacy, and producing our food that we can share that with people in a transparent way in a glass house. And there are seeds in that you could do the same for yourself.
Yeah, and we, have ventured out into like providing for consumption before, and even in those situations, like we always end up scaling back and being like, this isn't what we're supposed to be doing. And examples like very early on, maybe even before YouTube, I think it was before YouTube, Jessica started going to a farmer's market and selling. And it was something that Jackson went with her and did. Mm-hmm. It's where she first started a handmade pottery, if I'm not mistaken, where she started collecting it and buying it. But anyway, so like we made all this jam at home. Then we went to the farmer's market and we sold it all, right? Well, then we get down to where there's no more berries in season. So like we don't have and it was like, hey, do we have any of that jam? She's like, oh no, I sold it all. And I was like, so we have to go buy jam from the store? She's like, yeah. She's like, yeah, this wasn't what we're supposed to be doing. It's
not it, This
isn't for us. And so and I'm not saying that's not like what she said. It's not what people are supposed to be doing. But here's the thing, is like, you do what you're supposed to do. We're just sharing with what we're supposed to be doing, and that's not what we're supposed to be doing.
I think you have to consider the season of your life, too.
Yeah.
Like, when I'm feeding, it takes a ton of energy and work to grow the diet of a family our size. One kid being out of my house, like one man-sized man-child, he's living at his dorm, and he does come home and get raw milk and get things to take back to the dorm. But he primarily eats at school. Like, the amount of food that is taken off of the plate of my responsibility just to prepare, even though I'm preparing some things to send with him, so different. Like, and it was just such a sobering reality of like, girl, quit stressing about how much work it is to feed these boys and just feed them. It will be over soon. And I can make jam for the freaking community after I'm done feeding my children. Like, the skill set that I have learned.
Make some lunch, just a couple of eggs and 3 slices of bacon. That's all we had to make.
Can you imagine? Oh my God.
We had to clean up 2 plates and 2 forks. Because like how kids work is like they need a new cup for every drink. So it's like they got a milk cup, then they got their tea cup, then they got their water cup, then they got their second water cup, then their second milk cup. So and then everyone who has kids knows this, but like we were just like envisioning like, do you know how much like time if we wanted to do stuff like that later, like we'll have to find stuff to do. Because
Already.
we'll be so used to having such high capacity that, like, we'll have to fill it with something.
Yeah, right now, you can spring on me. You can say, hey, Jess, I need you to feed 25 people lunch. And I would have to sit there for a second and be like, okay. Like, I can do that. I can totally do that. I am a very high capacity person when it comes to being able to produce, but that doesn't change the fact that it is not the season of my life to be producing for other people to consume. I need to be producing for my family and using the opportunity that I've been given to produce content, to produce inspiration, and to be able to empower people to also produce for their family. So as it stands right now, we've actually made some really massive changes after the week where everything broke, the week where we discussed the lake house and decided that that's actually not what we really want to look at. We really do want to stay here on our farm. But we've made some really big adjustments. One, we decided to scale back pretty much everything to really assess what do we need? What do we need to cover our family's diet? Considering the fact that maybe we do share a little bit with neighbors and we do have like
Noah, Maddie, and Michaela.
Our kind of extended family that's close by. Like, we accounted for them, so it's not like we were like, oh, let's pare it down to the bare basics. But let's look everywhere where we're creating a lot of excess and energy is kind of going that way, and let's rein it all in. And in doing that, we actually
sold 15 head of the beef cows, or various
yeah, some of them were just like the mixes and stuff like that. We kept Bo the bull.
Our favorite Devon Brahma mama.
The big one. Ginger's her name. So a beef mama.
We kept the two almost fully grown out steers, Devon steers, that have been on grass their entire life. Which
gives us probably for our family at least, considering what we already have in the freezer, I mean, we've got our beef covered for at least a few years.
Definitely. So then as far as the milking operation, we have Helen, who's in milk, Freya, who's almost finished being dried off. So I
want to keep one cow in milk.
Right, so Helen will be the cow in milk. I've got Helen's calf. I've got Freya, who's almost done being dried off. She's actually going to go what we call on the shelf. So then we've got, it's Fern's daughter.
Yeah, Fraulein,
who's a full-blooded Jersey. She got bred or started.
Bull, I did put this in a vlog. The bull broke in with her, and I thought he might have bred her, but he didn't. She came back into heat, which was good.
Yeah, so she didn't get bred by Bo, which I didn't want anyways. So she went to our friend Charlie's house about 3 weeks ago and has been with his Dexter bull. So she's going to be our next milker. So it's 9 months from whenever it takes. So it could be a couple of months, leeway in there, just depending on how that goes. But I definitely have confirmation from Charlie that he bred her.
Yeah.
Now, again, whether that takes. So she'll be the next one that replaces Helen. Freya's going to stay on the shelf, and then Freya will come in, and then when she comes back into milk and has a calf, she'll replace Fraulein. Helen will be on the shelf, and then we'll rotate through like that. So I've kind of got it set up, and then at some point in the future, we've got Carol, who's a Devon Jersey cross. We kept her. I wanted to try that out as a milker because the Devons do so well on grass, so well on grass, that I think it might even be possible to have a milk cow that you don't have to feed grain to, and if you do, it's very minimal. So she's going to be our experimental cow in that. Plus, if we have a Dexter heifer from Fraulein, we might keep her and try the same thing. But that's it. So those are only dairy cows that we have.
And those future ones are ones that will eventually replace the older girls because we want to keep. Our goal is to, on average, have one cow.
The only time that it'll overlap is whenever you're drawing one off and after they just calve. So when they just calve, you've got 2 weeks before you start pulling milk, and then you start drying them off at the same time. So those should be the only times that you overlap.
We decided to stop breeding hogs for right now. That is something, again, I mean, we've just got a lot of pork that's coming in. We have multiple people in our local community that breed hogs. And so we're going to lean over just at least for the next handful of years into doing feeder pigs and do that system differently because we've been pasturing our hogs, which I love that for the sustainability sake. But one of the reasons why we want to keep pigs is because we have excess milk, because we have a home dairy, and it closes the loop on that. And so we're hauling these massive buckets of milk out to, once we do skim and all that stuff, we can pull cream out to the woods to take to the hogs. And so we're actually going to do like a deep litter method and keep them a little closer to the barn and just feed them out for the season.
Well, interestingly enough, when we were moving, the day we were moving Jackson in, I get a text message from Pop T and said, "Hey, the boar's out."
Yeah.
And I'm like, and this was like in the middle, like seriously, FERD, all that stuff was happening. And I just
we're on our way to USC.
I'm like, hey, I'm moving Jackson in. I was like, I'll text, Wes, and maybe if he's got time, he can come over and handle it. If he doesn't want to, is what it is. I was like, he'll be there when I get back, or he won't. Yeah. I was like, at that point, I was just like, well,
we live by a whole lot of woods, and so the risk is the boar would run off.
But at that point, I was like, I'm not going to drop Jackson off and then turn around and rush back to try. I was just like, okay, I'm just going to let it be. Now, he's back in. Like, he didn't run off because he wanted to stay close to the other hog. He knew that there would be feed. So, like, it was fine. But it was just like, it was one of those things I was like, do I really want to be having breeders right now? And I'm like, no, I don't.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just, we've bred hogs for almost 10 years, like, I mean, we've done this for a long time. I guess no, it hasn't been that long. It's about like 7.
About the same time that we've been doing YouTube.
Yeah. And we've done that. It's been good. But at some point, it's kind of like, is this really serving us in this season? So we decided to pull back on that. The thing is with the hogs is that they're grain-dependent animals. And so if our goal is self-reliance and not being dependent on any broken systems, if we still have to heavily lean into grain and a feed store in order to feed those animals, they're not actually serving the bigger goal anyway. So if we're going to cut down an area, that's where we want to. So we have enough grass-fed beef. We're trying to slowly gear our dairy operation to be less grain-dependent. We really like the sheep and the lambs, so we're looking at making that system more excellent. It works well with the beef and the other things that we're doing. With significantly less animals, we can lean into more rotational grazing. We're assessing all the areas of our farm and looking at different areas we can put pastures in. Paddocks and different things to move around to be able to sow some seed. Like, we want to sow our pastures more intentionally and really maximize the value of the grass that's growing on our pastures. And then I think this is, for me personally, I think one of the biggest decisions that we've made as far as adjustments. We actually decided we don't want to build a house yet. We've shared in the process of planning on building our forever home this year. Jeremiah told me, like, I think the first real long, deep conversation we had, that you wanted to build a house with your own 2 hands. That was like something you had said to me. And I love seeing people's dreams come true. And I think I probably pushed it more thinking that's what you wanted. But when we were discussing all of this, we basically had decided to stay in our house for this season. I realized that I had been really treating that home with a very temporary mindset. Like, in a lot
we
of
all have. Like, we never fully committed to that house as a place to, like, set up to live.
To be at home there. It was like,
I don't like getting things out of order. So I'm like, if I know that this is just a temporary thing, I hate temporary things. Like, just personally. Like, I just want to build the final thing. Because then I don't have to build the temporary thing down once the final thing. Like, I don't like shuffling that kind of stuff. So, like, I just never really even, I always just treated it like a rental house. I'm like, oh, we'll be here, we'll make do.
Something breaks and we're like, we'll fix it when we move.
Multiple things like that.
I didn't ever paint. A lot of places we didn't even hang stuff up on the walls. It was literally just like, we're going to live here until
we get to the house that we want.
And this year when we decided, okay, well, all the doors are closed and we don't need to build our house, we were talking and I was like, I can't stay in this temporary mindset anymore. I need to make my home. Like, I need to organize. There was a lot of things. Like, I had too much stuff in my kitchen. But it was like, well, when we have the new house, we're going to have more space. And, like, instead of downsizing, instead of getting rid of stuff, instead of managing the systems, it was like, well, let's just get through. And when you're opening your kitchen cabinets and, like, stuff is falling out on you, it's insanely frustrating, especially when you cook from scratch every single day of your life.
I'm sure we're the only ones who have stuff like that.
Yeah, I bet.
I bet you everyone's kitchens are immaculately organized.
Well, I start tackling, and I start like, I'm going to make this house a home.
I think the big catalyst for that was also Jackson going to college. So we moved Jackson out, and in that process, like, we start looking at the room situation. We've got 4 boys at home. We want to make sure that Jackson has a space that if when he does come back, he can. But we've also now got to prioritize that these
so
other
we
boys
started
are getting older.
organizing.
We started just like
shifting.
We started in the bedrooms, and it was like my kids had accumulated so much stuff. I'm like, guys, this is your kindergarten. You colored the letter A. Like, why? I think it's cute. It's great. But like, why do we still have 20 of them? You know what I'm saying? And it was just like little stuff like, guys, decide what's really important to you, and then let's get rid of all the other stuff. And then we would walk into those bedrooms and be like, man, this feels really good. And then that kind of spearheaded into...
Well, we realized how temporarily we'd been using our home.
Right.
We had this dream we're working towards, and we're just doing the next thing, and we're going towards this dream.
Well, it's that resilience thing. We'll just keep our head down in this temporary house until we build the new house, then we'll get to have all the organization and everything will feel good.
But the truth is that wherever you go, there you are. Like, we would still be us, the clutter-keeping, unorganized people in a newer, bigger house. And we would, honestly, the reality is you think that you're going to treat a different space different, but you are the same steward wherever you are. Like,
that's true.
And you can outgrow a space. You can become limited by what you have. I always tell people when they ask me about camera equipment, what camera do you have? I'm like, I've been a photographer for 20 years. If you're learning, you do not need the equipment that I have. Like, get a beginner camera and outgrow it. Like, get what you need to start or use what you have to start and outgrow it until it's holding you back, and then move into it. But the idea that what you have is not enough, you're going to have all the same mindsets and habits in the new space too, in the dream too. And I always say, turn your waiting room into a classroom. And I feel like this has really been a greater lesson of that same thing for us. I think we've done that over and over and over in different applications. Mm-hmm. But the thing I'm realizing is a lot of times you think you're in a waiting room and you can just sit there on your hands and wait. But anytime you're in a classroom, there's growth. And the turn your waiting room into a classroom thing is like, make it that there are 0 temporary places in your life. Even though there are real temporary waiting situations you have to live in. You're waiting to get pregnant, you're waiting for a new job, you're waiting for retirement. There are real things. But that shouldn't limit you from being fully alive and present in your life. So we start working on our house. Painting, getting rid of stuff, organizing, making the most of the space. Having one less person in that house was like, whoa, this is significantly like less cramped with one less person around. And then assessing, Asher's in his senior year, Toby's 5 years behind him. Like, man, and we start looking at it, and I start thinking about what we were planning on doing. We had house plans. We had custom house plans made. We're going to make this beautiful home that accommodates everything we need right now. But when we were talking about building that house, it was like, Jeremiah's like, well, I can't frame a house this big. I can't, it was kind of, we were having to make a lot of compromises in how we were going to build it because of what we were trying to build.
Yeah.
And essentially one night I'm laying in bed thinking about it, and Maya's half asleep, and I was like, hey. Anybody married to an ADHD woman knows what it is to get a tap when your dad is asleep. Hey, I was thinking about something. But I was like...
It could be anything from ice cream to I'm going to run for Congress.
I haven't ever said that.
I know.
You're just anticipating the day.
Those are the 2 spectrums. Hey, I have an idea. You want to get some ice cream? Yes. Hey, I have another idea. I want to be president. Okay, honey, I support you.
So...
I get the tap.
He gets the tap, and I'm like, what if we don't build a house right now? He's like, we already decided that. And I was like, what if we... And he's like, we'll talk about it in the morning. So the next morning he wakes up and I'm awake.
Sitting like crisscross applesauce on the bed. Like, so if I'm laying this way, facing this way, she's facing me crisscross applesauce with like a notebook. And like I kind of roll over and creak my eyes open, and she's sitting there smiling like this. You ready to talk about my idea? Yes.
He's like, let me get some coffee.
Can I stretch?
So we sat down that morning, and I was like, hear me out. I know your dream is to build a house with your own 2 hands. And I need to know, because if your dream is to build this house we're planning on building, I will get 100% behind you and we'll figure out if that is really your dream. But I need you to really look at it and know, is that really your dream? Like, what is it when you talked about building your own house that you really wanted to do? And he sat and he thought about it and he said, I really just wanted to build it myself. I said, I noticed in preparing to timber frame your shop that you have been so much more excited than you ever were talking about the house. Why is that? And he said, because I'm going to be doing this really cool thing myself. You know, I'm building it myself. I'm doing something that's challenging and new and exciting, and I'm going to create something that's really special. And I proposed, I said, what if we just stayed here? Like, what, we can do a little addition onto our current house. We do need a couple more minor spaces to make it a little more functional, but nothing like, I'd like a big front porch that's screened in and a couple things like that. And I was like, what if we just stayed here and raised our kids here? And in 10 years, when our children are grown, you can timber frame us a house that suits the next season of our life. And, you know, building a house right now and us trying to do as much of the work as possible ourselves was going to take so much of our time. And when we're really assessing how little time we had, do you really want to spend that not being able to be the baseball dad, not being able to, you know, be present? Do we really want to have to put on the chopping block the things that really matter to us? Or should we instead order all of the things in our life to raise our children, prioritize our marriage, and grow the food that we actually need? And then teach other people to do the same thing. Like, those are the things that, those are the cards we really want to hold. And, you know, anytime that we are like proposing something, a change of plans, it's not a fast thing. So I've said, I'm going to propose this idea to you. I want you to sit with it. And I think you took a couple of days and really thought about, okay, if we don't build a house, what are we going to do here? What are we going to do? Like, really sat with it. And Jeremiah came back and said, I actually really like that. And he's like, and it really excites me, one, to know I'm going to have the time with the kids and the family now, but two, the idea of actually timber framing a house for us and building like our next season of life house is 100%.
Well, and something that was like very important to Jessica that she communicated in proposing this was that she felt like it was really important, or one of her desires. If, like,
I think that was why I was pushing, like why I wanted to get the house done. I recognized my why in that.
Right. But for me, for like, if my why was I want to be able to do it with my, like, build it myself, hers was I really want the kids to be able to come back to the house that they grew up in. And for our older kids, like, we're kind of missing that window now. Because if we were to start the house now, by the time it was finished, like, that's not the house that they finished growing up in this state. And so we were like, well, what if we stayed here and we did this stuff? That was a big factor, because they would come back to the house. Yeah,
even if we build a house that's like our home in the next season, like we'll bought this house and put this on the back corner of our property. The whole thing when we did that was we were like, well, this will be space for grown kids. If we ever need to house someone, you know, in our family, like, if we'll have this space. And it just, it occurred to me, like, why don't I just raise my kids here?
I mean, we already are.
Yeah, we already are. We have. I mean,
now we're just going to do it intentionally.
And now we're going to do it intentionally. And I've dove so hard into making my house a home that it feels so silly to realize that I ever thought I needed something different or more than that to experience what I'm feeling now. It's so good. I mean, your home is where you pour your heart into. Your home is where you pour your love into. Your home is where you bake the bread and where you sit around the table together, and it doesn't matter if it's cramped. It really doesn't. You know, like, and I am feeling more at home in that what I thought was going to be a temporary place. And I feel so overwhelmed with gratitude. And now there's even this new layer. Wow, thank you, home, for giving us a place where we're going to have all this extra time. And I mean, I had a moment that was like, we laid this whole farm out thinking we were going to do a different plan.
Well, yeah, one of the things she had suggested was like, well, what if we move
I know. I was like, should we
to the
move
spot, to the prime spot where we were
like,
going
no.
to? I was like, no, that's too far.
Well, that was before we had decided, you could timber frame a house down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Like...
So we're going to keep it where it's at, but we have started coming up with plans of what to do around that as if that's where we're staying.
Yeah.
And that's been a huge change.
So exciting. It is exciting. Honestly, like feeling the tension of like our culture is tense right now. And I talk to... in the seat where we are, we hear everybody who freaks out. Oh my gosh, we need food security. And it's like, yes, food security is very good. Let me share with you kind of our journey. We do need food security. We do need a localized food. We do need to find as much freedom within what we're able to produce for ourselves. We need to be creators instead of consumers. One of the things that we're really looking at is how do we need less? Because there's so much security in that. And like for us, like staying in our double wide and, doing some renovations on it and painting it and making it a home and feeling content and satisfied, which I so deeply do. I'm so thankful. I'm no longer feeling the pressure of, we have to make these dreams come true. Mm-hmm. I don't. That's not the nature of it. I can trust God to make my dreams come true. And truly finding the contentment in the tension between, there are things I still expecting. I still want to get our businesses open. I still, I do believe that one day you're going to build a house with your own two hands, but it'll be right and it's not going to take away from the other things that are important from us. Yeah.
So like, in assessing the fact that like Ben in 9 years will be where Jackson's at, I'm like, I don't want to spend 2 of those fully focusing on
building a house. It's honestly going to be more than we need
by the time that it gets done. Right.
And so it's just like, yeah, it's just been so freeing. Our farm is quieter. We got a lot less cows around here. We are gearing towards, we still have the breeder hogs, but we're kind of gearing towards just downsizing everything. Really by the end of the year, I think we'll have all our systems kind of in place.
Yeah, I don't even know if it'll take that long. I think I'm a few weeks away from getting everything. That's like one big thing for me is that in doing all the audits and downsizing and scaling, like one thing that we're going to work on in the off season is resetting and planning out the garden for next year that's scaled. Beautiful, probably more beautiful because it'll be more manageable, but we're going to do it together. I'm going to finish a lot of the stuff that has gotten left undone because of capacity. I'm going to have more capacity. Stuff that I've wanted to do, just...
Yeah, we've talked every year, and I mean, I always knew it was going to take us about 5 years to finish building this garden, but like building fences and structures and arbors and all of that
watering systems and all that, like we're going to really we're getting the house in order right now, and when I say in order, like we're making it our home, like we're putting our intention fully on living in this house long term.
I'm painting, I'm hanging stuff up on the walls. I think I've gotten rid of I've probably gotten rid of about 1/8 of the contents of our home. Like I've just donated just carload after carload after carload of stuff that was like, you haven't touched that in the 3 years that you've lived here, but for some reason you were hanging on to it for when you had more space. Like I just downsizing and honestly just preparing to really need less.
And have more time to do the things that you really feel like you're supposed to be doing, like being there for your kids, but even on like the homestead side, like I've had horses. Make cheese. Okay, like I've had.
I want to make cheese.
Your face when you said cheese.
Because I love cheese and I can't eat very much of it.
For me, it was horses. Like I've had horses for a few years now at this property. I had horses in Arkansas, but like there was always some reason. Something I needed to do, some fire I had to put out, whatever, where I honestly didn't ride the horses. And I would always be like, I really just don't have time for this.
And it was always, I'll get through this season and the next season.
Yeah, and it was never the case. So, like, we start making these shifts, and, like, I've consistently now ridden, every week for, like, 5 weeks in a row.
And it feels so good.
It's very good. It's probably, like, one of my favorite things I do every week.
Yeah.
So, huge.
Yeah. I don't even know exactly what the point is to share all of this with you. I know this is a really long video, and I know at this point it's probably our faithful followers that have been with us for a long time.
If you stuck out this long?
I have done some kind of lighthearted vlogs without fully addressing, hey, we went through this really hard thing. We've been assessing everything. Our goal is time with our family, minding the foundational reasons of why we're doing this, having resilience as far as like having what we need and bringing our farm into alignment with needing less. and being able to share with you guys, because when we sit down and look at all the cards we're holding, the impact of being able to turn the camera on and inspire other people to create for their families is something I don't want to have to lay down.
Right.
And I've not had the capacity to really do that the way I've wanted to this year, because we've just been spread so thin. And everybody's always asked me, Jess, how do you manage so much? How do you keep up with so much? And I'm like, well, I really just try to make sure that I don't drop the important balls. What do they say? When you're juggling a lot, some balls are plastic and some are glass. Just know that you don't drop the glass ones. And I think that it's completely okay, like how, you know, I haven't done nearly as much content as I normally do. I haven't created nearly as much as I normally do in this year. And it's okay, but I don't want to drop that ball.
Yeah.
And even beyond that, there are more things that I want to do in the future. Like I want to write a poetry book. Like I want to write, there are some fiction novels that I've had outlined for years that like I want to do, but there was never enough capacity to do that. And it's kind of saying, hey, what can we pare back that the life we are living is on purpose?
So, you know, Jessica's like, you know, she said, made a comment just a little bit ago about like the point. Like, I think the point is like, one, like assess what you're doing and why regularly. Like take a step
regularly.
back and regularly think, because this is not the first time we've had to come through this process and be like, why are we doing some of this stuff? And then scale back, adjust, move, whatever. Like be willing to not do something. Like you think I don't know, like the pressure of like, for like example, like doing those custom house plans, like that costs money, you know, to start the process of building that house, you know, paying for the survey, paying for the appraisal, all that stuff costs money. I could very easily feel pressure about the fact that I invested money and time into this thing, ultimately to say, I'm not going to do it. Mm-hmm. Like, and a lot of people will just be like, no, I've already spent the money, I've already made this decision, I've already committed, now I'm just going to follow through with it no matter what. And they get themselves into positions where they shouldn't have. They should have been willing to say, you know what, I don't really know exactly why I felt like I was supposed to do that and then spend that money and spend that time and all that, but it got me to this point, and I know right now in this point that I'm not supposed to do that. So maybe I just had to go through that process to get to I'm not supposed to.
Well, it's just kind of like we planned this whole farm around this house we were going to build. It's going to be up here, the garden goes all the way down the driveway, and as I said, I do think we will do that eventually, and then the whole layout will make more sense. But right now, it's like we're living on the far back corner. It's right next to where his shop is going to be. But then we thought about it, and I was like, you know what? We now have this pasture, which was going to be our house and yard, but there's a whole new pasture that we're going to use for the next however many years. But our house being on the back corner, there is actually a benefit in that, because we want to open up to classes. Once we have the shop and have the community room, we want to open up and have classes here. We want to host people. And the fact that our house is tucked away back there, it actually is really beneficial. So I think a lot of times we make our plans and plow forward to them. And a lot of times we say, oh, we can't change plans. Nothing would make sense because we planned for this thing. We can't back off of that. But then when you decide to, you all of a sudden you kind of reorder everything and you look at it and go, man, I think we did this exactly how we were supposed to do it, without even realizing what we were working towards.
Right. Or why.
Or why. And that's beautiful. That's encouraging. It's like when you are willing to look at your life and live it on purpose, there is a certain like security net. And, you know, and I say this in faith, but like there's a security net of like, God really uses everything for good. Like, I can't miss it. You know, like if I'm doing this on purpose and love is my priority and intentionally using my life for glory and honor and for loving the people around me, I'm not going to miss it. Who cares where my house is? It'll be fine. You know?
Right. It will.
Oh man. Well, this is very long.
I think it's very good though. Not having this conversation has kind of limited us on being able to like fully talk about where we're at and what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so like we felt like we've had to like kind of like keep a portion of where we're at from you guys. And I really feel like this is going to just open that door to be back in a glass house.
It was too much to just casually talk about. You'll notice that there's a change in the camera. Oh, and there's a little buggy. We just killed the battery because this video is so long.
Oh, good. All right. It's going to be fine. This is for somebody. I believe that. This is for somebody.
This is us living in a glass house. It's not it's not easy to be like, hey, here's all our process and this makes me feel a little flaky, but the truth is that life is not neat and tidy. And if I were to present to you that we were people that just killed it all the time and made it all the way to our goals without having to reassess and look at the cards we were holding, if I were to present to you that we had a healthy family and you are like, how do you have this relationship? It's the work. It's showing up. It's having the hard conversations. It's dealing with stuff instead of keeping our head down.
Yeah.
And we're still very much in process. I don't look at us as the example of how to do everything, but I do want to be a person that's living my life on purpose.
Yeah.
And
what we're doing.
This has been that. So that's it. We killed the battery in the camera because this video is so long, so we won't keep it going any longer.
But we'll have some more coffee / fireside /
there was no fire.
But it just feels
They may
like
have a fire. They may have a fire.
We'll do some more chat. I think this is good.
Yeah. All right. We bless you guys. Oh, thank you for hanging out with us today, the last 7 years, any day that you do. We bless you. Until next time.